namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Iran has lost its president and foreign minister in a helicopter crash. No foul play is being suspected as of now. It was an old chopper that crashed in bad weather. The investigation is on, as is speculation on who will take over, both as Iran's next president and supreme leader, because President Raisi was said to be on course to take the top job in Iran. His death has created vacuum and uncertainty. We'll tell you about it and how Iran is dealing with this. Meanwhile, Israel is staring at the prospect of an arrest warrant against its prime minister from the International Criminal Court for war crimes in Gaza. In Taiwan, a power transition, a new president has taken over today, and he has a message for China. In the UK, the Indian origin prime minister is richer than the British king. This is according to a new wealth report. In South Africa, former President Zuma is disqualified from the election. What does it mean for the polls next week? Elon Musk, who cancelled his India visit citing urgent work, has all the time to visit the region, first China, now Indonesia, as countries try to get his Starlink service. We'll tell you about it. Also in Indonesia, dramatic volcanic eruptions spewing ash up to 4 kilometers and cold lava. We'll show you the pictures and the story of a man who spent 100 days underwater and came out 10 years younger. Not making this up. The headlines first. Julian Assange wins a major legal battle in the UK. He can now appeal against his extradition to the US. Since 2019, the WikiLeaks founder has been held in a London prison. Washington wants Assange to stand trial in the US. He's accused of breaking US national security laws. Democratic Republic of Congo thwarts a coup attempt. The military says they foiled a bid near the president's offices in the capital on Sunday. The leader of the attempted coup has been killed. 50 people have also been arrested, including 3 American citizens. India votes in the 5th phase of the general election. Polling took place in 49 seats across 6 states and 2 union territories. West Bengal recorded the highest voting percentage and Maharashtra the lowest. The results of the 7th phase election will be announced on 4th June. New Caledonia separatists defy France, refusing to unblock roads. The airport will also remain shut till Thursday. Last week, protests erupted in the French territory. It was triggered by Paris's plans to give non-indigenous residents voting rights. And Spain demands a public apology from Argentina's president as the diplomatic crisis escalates between the Hispanic allies. President Javier Milei had called the Spanish Prime Minister's wife corrupt. Madrid has already recalled its ambassador to Buenos Aires. We begin with Iran and the tragic developments there. A helicopter crash that resulted in the death of their president and foreign minister. The chopper went missing yesterday. Today, the worst was confirmed. Tehran has declared 5 days of mourning, but it also insists that there won't be a disruption, that the government will continue operating. It will be a big test for the hardliners who rule the country. They must find a successor, and they must do so quickly, someone who can steer Iran through one of the most volatile periods in West Asia. Tonight, as we recount the events of the last 24 hours, we'll also look at the road ahead. And we begin with some images, the last moments of President Ebrahim Raisi.
بازدید رئیس جمهور از راهگذر ترانزیتی شمال غرب کشور مسیری مواصلاتی به هم متصل می‌کند.
در مرز کلاله و بعد از اون به موازات مرز
سدی که تهران و باکو آن را نما.
This video was aired by Iranian state TV. The chopper crashed on Sunday. Raisi and his team were in the northeast of Iran, in the province called East Azerbaijan. It's on the border between Iran and Azerbaijan, but the crash happened in Iranian territory. They were returning from a ceremony, a dam opening at the border. It was a high-profile event. Azerbaijan's president, Ilham Aliyev, was also present. So this ceremony was Raisi's last official act as Iran's president. The chopper went down in this area, the Dizmar protected area. It's a wildlife corridor spread across Iran's border with Azerbaijan. There were 9 officials on board this chopper. The president was accompanied by Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, a governor, a cleric, and 5 other close aides. No one survived the crash. Their deaths were announced by Iranian state TV this morning.
We are all from God and we go back to Him. The servant of Imam Reza and the servant of people, Dr. President Ebrahim Raisi, the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, became a martyr in the path of serving the people.
So what happened? Why and how did the chopper crash? The details are limited as of now. Here's what we have. This was a hilly area covered by dense forest. As you can see, the weather was poor yesterday. There was a thick fog over the area, and these conditions could have led to the crash. The Iranian press is reporting that Raisi's chopper made a hard landing, so the weather may have caused complications for the pilot. But did the helicopter malfunction? The possibility cannot be ruled out. The president and his team were flying in a Bell 212. That was the name of the chopper, Bell 212. It's an American chopper, a 4-decade-old relic, most likely bought before the Islamic Revolution during the rule of the Shah. This was a non-combat chopper designed to ferry government officials. So the chopper was fit for the purpose. But was it fit for flying? 40 years is a long time, even for the best of machines. Iran has been under Western sanctions for years now. It did not have access to replace parts of the chopper or to any new equipment. Now, it's not clear how well this machine was maintained. Here's what experts say. Given the lack of technology and upgrades, the pilot had to rely solely on their ability to navigate tricky situations like bad weather or difficult terrain. So the helicopter could have been outdated. As it turned out, 2 more choppers were part of Raisi's convoy. Both survived. It was only the president's ride that crashed. Was this a case of foul play then? So far, there's nothing to suggest that. Tehran has been treading cautiously. Yesterday, we heard from Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the Supreme Leader of Iran, and he chose his words carefully.
Whether you are present here or those who will hear my message later, be sure that there will be no disruption in the work of the country. Officials have been busy with their work very strongly since this evening after hearing the news of the incident.
Israel has been cautious too. When the announcement came today, Israeli officials were quick to distance themselves. Israel says they had no role whatsoever in this crash. What about the United States? The American president is yet to comment. Reports say Joe Biden has been briefed. He's yet to make a public statement. Leaders from the UAE, Russia, China, and the European Union have all spoken. They've offered condolences to Tehran. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi also issued a statement. He was, in fact, among the first leaders to offer condolences. And what about the people of Iran? How have they reacted to President Raisi's death? Well, the reactions have been mixed. Inside Iran, in some pockets, people took to the streets to mourn their president's death. Some crowds were seen in neighboring Iraq too. But some reports paint a different story. They say people distributed sweets when Raisi and his allies were declared dead. Outside Iran, in Germany and the UK, some Iranians in exile celebrated. In the days ahead, the world will be closely watching Iran. Mohammad Mokhber, Iran's current vice president, has taken charge for now. This is a temporary appointment. If a serving president passes in office, Iran's constitution mandates a fresh election. Some observers fear that this tragedy could spark a power struggle.
I mean, I think a lot of people might celebrate or might be happy, but also a lot of people, I think, naturally would be very worried. We all expected a ferocious struggle for power to begin after Khamenei dies. It might have already begun with this incident.
There are no obvious successors in sight yet. How the hardliners navigate the situation could determine the future of the regime and that of the country. A leader's death is a deadly blow for any country, but here it's a double whammy because Raisi was not just president, he was also supreme leader in waiting. Most people expected him to succeed Ayatollah Khamenei. So his death is like a reset. It will force Iran back to the drawing board. We'll tell you about the key players and how the odds are stacked. But first, let's tell you more about Raisi himself. How did he accumulate so much power? How did he rise to the top? Raisi was born in 1960 in the city of Mashhad. His family was deeply religious. You may have noticed the black turban that he used to wear. That's actually a religious symbol. Raisi traced his heritage to Prophet Muhammad, which is why he wore this black turban. He completed his religious training in the city of Qom. It's a holy city believed to be the center of Shia Islam. That's where Raisi got the title of Ayatollah. It's a position in Islamic hierarchy, Ayatollah. Only high-ranking clerics become Ayatollahs. It was all the rage in the 20th century. In the 1970s, when the Iranian Revolution came, Raisi was ready for it. As a young man, he supported Ayatollah Khamenei, the first supreme leader. Iran has had only two supreme leaders so far, Ruhollah Khomeini, who served from 1979 to 1989, and Ali Khamenei, who's been supreme leader since 1989. He's the current leader. Raisi worked for both of them. He served as a local prosecutor. In fact, he spent most of his career in the judiciary. In the 1980s, he was on a judicial commission, and this commission sentenced thousands of political prisoners to death. By some accounts, 5,000 of them. And this brutality earned Raisi a moniker, the Butcher of Tehran. That's what he was called. He was heavily sanctioned by Western governments. But his loyalty to the religious leaders in Iran never wavered. And that was a feature of his life. Raisi lived and breathed the Iranian Revolution. And that is why Khamenei liked him. In 2017, Ebrahim Raisi contested the presidential election. He was backed by Iran's clergy, yet he lost. In 2019, he was appointed as head of the judiciary. And in 2021, he ran for president again. This time, in 2021, he had more support of the regime. The whole contest was rigged in Raisi's favor. Many moderates were disqualified. Many hardliners dropped out. So Raisi became the only prominent face. As president, his rule had three pillars: cracking down at home, challenging the West, and closer ties with Russia and China. We start with the crackdown. We saw that during the anti-hijab protests. President Raisi refused to back down. Instead, he pushed on with moral policing and tried to crush the protests with force. Number two, resisting the West. Raisi was in no hurry to negotiate a nuclear deal. He refused to budge from his positions. Under him, Iran also enriched more uranium. Their reserves are at 60% enrichment. Around 90% is weapons grade. Finally, pillar number three, closer ties with China and Russia. Raisi traveled to Beijing last year. It was the first trip by an Iranian president in 20 years. He also took Iran into two multilateral groups, BRICS and SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Both are groups with China and Russia. There are also reports of Iranian drones being used against Ukraine, and all of these suggest close ties. It also suggests why the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, picked him. Both men were on the same page, same ideology, same politics, same approach, which is why Raisi's death is very consequential. It raises questions about the future of Iran. The biggest question is that of succession. Iran's constitution is quite clear about it. If a president dies, the first vice president takes over. In this case, that's Mohammad Mokhber. He's very close to the supreme leader, even managed an investment fund linked to Khamenei. So like Raisi, he's a loyalist. But Mokhber is only a caretaker. He must hold presidential elections within 50 days. Then a new president will be elected. And who will that be? Who will the new president be? There are no indications yet. Iran's presidential candidates are vetted by a special body. The whole process is overseen by Ayatollah Khamenei. So it all comes down to him. In 2021, Khamenei used the presidency to groom Raisi, to give him some ruling experience. Will he do the same again? Or will he opt for a rubber stamp leader? I ask because the choice goes beyond the presidency. Khamenei, remember, is 85 years old. So his succession is also in play. And one name doing the rounds is Mojtaba Khamenei, the Supreme Leader's son. But it's not a done deal yet. The regime is not a fan of hereditary succession. They think it's a bit like the monarchy. So as of now, there is no clear frontrunner, either for president or for Supreme Leader. And that's a huge worry for Iran. We are talking about a theocracy here, a country where democracy is managed by the regime. So leadership and succession are existential issues. A clean succession will consolidate the regime's grip. A messy one will weaken it. And Khamenei knows this. His messaging is all about stability. He says the government will operate without disruption. In other words, do not worry, we have it all under control. But such assurances may not be enough because the regime is already facing many challenges, like a weak economy and brewing social discontent. Which brings us back to my first point. Iran will be forced back to the drawing board. The regime has two priorities as of now. One is to pick a successor, both for the presidency and the Supreme Leader. And second is consolidation, to tighten its grip on the country. Now the question is, what will that look like? A foreign policy gamble? More crackdowns at home, or a daring regional campaign? These are nervous times for Iran and West Asia. It's also a good time to look at Iran, not the regime, but the country. How is life after the Islamic Revolution? Do people in Iran support Ayatollah Khamenei, or is there scope for a revolt? We'll be focusing on three aspects: the economy, the civil society, and security. The economy is not in good shape. Years of Western sanctions can do that to any country. Inflation in Iran was under 10% in 2016. This was under the moderates in 2016. Now in 2024, it is more than 40%. Poverty is also rampant. Some reports say 50% of the country, half the country, is living in poverty. And honestly, it's a waste of potential because Iran has a lot of resources. It has the second largest gas reserves in the world, the fourth largest crude reserves, and also deposits of coal, copper, and iron ore. Yet their economy is struggling, all because of sanctions. Iran cannot buy cutting-edge technology from the global market, nor can they sell their oil freely. And both these curbs have handicapped their economy. Now we come to the second aspect, civil society. Iran once used to be a liberal country, a hub of art and music. But that's not the case anymore. The regime strictly controls what people do, especially what women do. Look at some of the things that women in Iran cannot do. They cannot go out without a hijab, cannot ride a bicycle, cannot dance or sing solo in public, cannot attend sporting events, cannot become judges or politicians, and cannot travel without a guardian's permission. In simpler words, Iranian women are second-class citizens. And what happens if you resist these rules? A young woman did try in 2022. Her name was Masha Amini. She was apparently wearing her hijab wrong. You may remember what happened to her. She was arrested by the moral police. She later died in their custody. Same with other civil liberties. Right to expression is limited. Right to protest does not exist. And right to assemble is met with crackdowns. And behind all this is the judiciary, a system that rules based on the Islamic law or Sharia. Even minor offenses have major consequences. In fact, executions are quite common in Iran. Last year, Iran executed more than 800 people. This year, they have executed more than 200 so far. One of them was on Saturday. A 53-year-old woman was hanged to death. What was her crime? Some drug-related offense. So the overall picture is quite clear. Life in Iran can be precarious. If you follow the regime's draconian rules, you're fine. If not, you're in trouble. Which brings us to the third aspect, security. Iran's internal security is managed by the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are fully loyal to the Ayatollah Khamenei. And their favorite language is crackdown. Crime rates are generally low in Iran. Even threats like terrorism are largely contained. We did see an attack this year, though. The Islamic State targeted a mosque in Kerman. They killed around 100 people, but the consensus is that this was a rare attack. So let's recap now. Iran's economy is like a never-ending bitter pill. Civil liberties do not exist, but security is top-notch. It's almost like a theocratic police state. But these internal issues are not Iran's top priority. That would be the external challenges. You see, Iran lives in a tough neighborhood. It has very few friends in West Asia. The Arab states see Iran as a rival, and Israel sees them as a threat. This dynamic has shaped post-revolution Iran, their foreign policy, their nuclear policy, their economic policy. All of it is designed based on this dynamic. And this year, things got a lot more dangerous. Israel and Iran exchanged direct fire. It's never happened before. Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles at Israel, and Israel responded with a limited strike. That exchange really shook things up. It has forced Iran to rethink important questions. For starters, is an Arab reset reliable? Last year, they thought yes. Iran normalized relations with Saudi Arabia, but things have not pushed on from there. Many reports say that Arab states gave intelligence to Western powers. They indirectly helped to shoot down Iranian drones. So can the reset ever become permanent? And secondly, should Iran seek nuclear weapons? Supreme Leader Khamenei's advisor says yes, they should. He was speaking at after Israel's military response, and he said Iran would make nukes if their nuclear sites were targeted. You know what that means? More Western condemnation, more sanctions, and more hardships. So Iran is going through a very complicated period, a period of churn and hardships. The revolution of 1979 destroyed Western control over Iran. It freed a great civilization from Western grasp. I guess that counts as a win. But that win has come at a great cost of freedoms, prosperity, and progress. Our next story is about the ICC, the International Criminal Court, based in The Hague in the Netherlands. The ICC made an announcement today, one that was long suspected, but still shocking. The ICC is seeking an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister. He may soon become a wanted man. What for? His actions in Gaza. He's been accused of war crimes, and Netanyahu is not the only one. Israel's Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, is also in the dock.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023. The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder, persecution, and allegations of crimes of committing other inhumane acts.
That's an extensive list. Starving civilians, intentionally attacking civilians, extermination. Netanyahu is being charged with all of this and more. If you go through the ICC statement on their website, it gets worse. Arbitrarily restricting food and medicines, shutting off Gaza's water, hindering electricity to the enclave. You had the aid delivery massacre on the 29th of February when more than 100 Palestinians were killed. On the 1st of April, there was an attack on 7 aid workers from World Central Kitchen. All of this is mentioned in the ICC prosecutor's statement. This is why he wants a warrant for Netanyahu.
My office charges Netanyahu and Gallant as co-perpetrators and as superiors in the commission of these alleged crimes. Israel, like all states, has the right to defend its population. It has every right to ensure the return of hostages that have been criminally and callously taken. Those rights, however, do not absolve Israel of its obligations to comply with international humanitarian law.
He mentions Israel's right to defend itself, the right to ensure the return of hostages. But what about those who took the hostages in the first place? What does the ICC have to say about Hamas? Well, they're seeking warrants against 3 Hamas leaders, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Dief, and Ismail Haniyeh. Sinwar is the head of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Dief is the commander-in-chief of their military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades, and Haniyeh is head of the Hamas Political Bureau. All 3 are also being held liable for numerous crimes like murder, taking hostages, rape, torture, and inhumane treatment. So the ICC prosecutor wants to arrest the 3 Hamas leaders as well. But what message does this convey? Netanyahu is being treated the same way as Hamas. An elected prime minister in a democracy is being clubbed together with the leaders of Hamas, a group that Israel and its Western allies have designated terrorists. It's clearly a slap in the face for Benjamin Netanyahu.
Those who do not comply with the law should not complain later when my office takes action based upon solid evidence. That day has come. Today, we underline in the clearest possible fashion that international law and the laws of armed conflict apply to everyone. No foot soldier, no commander, no civilian leader, no one can act with impunity.
He says no one can act with impunity, but that is only partially true. There are a number of reasons why that statement is more bravado than fact. First of all, the ICC is seeking a warrant. It hasn't issued one. The prosecutor has approached judges in the ICC. They will decide if the charges hold merit. A warrant will be issued only if they agree. That could take weeks, even months. So Netanyahu is free to do as he pleases until then. And even if a warrant does get issued, that does not mean that Netanyahu will be arrested on the spot. Israel does not recognize the International Criminal Court's authority. It has no reason to comply with any ICC warrant. So Netanyahu will be free in Israel and in other countries that do not recognize ICC warrants. Countries like the US, India, Russia, and China. But there are 124 countries that do abide by the ICC's ruling. So Netanyahu won't be able to travel to those nations. Another leader is facing the same issue, and that's Russian President Vladimir Putin. The ICC put out a warrant for Putin last year. So he's been careful about where he travels. But Putin remains free. And Netanyahu probably will too. But despite the obvious negatives, the ICC warrant may have had some unexpected benefits as well. It seems to have united Israeli leaders. Benny Gantz, for instance, is a member of Netanyahu's war cabinet. He had threatened to resign yesterday, but today he's defending the prime minister. He said equating Netanyahu with Hamas is, quote-unquote, a moral blindness. And if the ICC issues a warrant, it will be, and I'm quoting again, a crime of historic proportions. Israel's leader of the opposition, former Prime Minister Yair Lapid, also condemned the ICC announcement. He asked the US to intervene. So the ICC's move may actually help Netanyahu at home. It may keep political opponents at bay. But if an arrest warrant does get issued, it will be a net loss. It will put the Israeli Prime Minister at the same level as the Hamas leaders, the people behind the October 7th attack. That would be a permanent mark on Netanyahu's legacy. Now let's talk about Taiwan, another geopolitical flashpoint that saw a power transition today. A new president has taken charge of this island. His name is Lai Ching-te. He won the presidential election in January this year. He's taken oath today, but in the past few months, he's got a fair idea of what's in store for him. Because China has been on his case, ramping up pressure, calling him a dangerous separatist, and sending warships and warplanes to flex its military muscle. Today, President Lai issued a response. Our next report has the details.
31 times. That's how often Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, used the phrase democracy in his inauguration speech. Clearly, in the face of constant threats from China, Lai Ching-te wants to make democracy Taiwan's biggest strength. He wants Beijing to accept this reality.
I hope that China will face the reality of the Republic of China's existence, respect the choices of the people of Taiwan.
Lai's swearing in reaffirmed the strength of Taiwan's democratic institutions. They have withstood Beijing's relentless efforts to interfere, influence, and isolate the island. But the greatest challenge to Taiwan comes from China's military. Taiwan's new president decided to confront the PLA today by issuing a warning.
I also want to call on China to stop threatening Taiwan politically and militarily, take on global responsibility of maintaining peace and stability, to ensure the world is free from the fear of war.
Lai wants China to end the intimidation of the island. But Beijing is paying no heed to Lai's messages. Before he took the oath of office, China had declared Lai a separatist and dismissed any prospect of dialogue. This morning, China decided to double down.
What I want to emphasize is this: Taiwan independence is a dead end. No matter under what guise or what banner, pursuing Taiwan independence and secession is doomed to fail.
These pictures would embolden Beijing further. A day before the inauguration, thousands of protesters assembled outside the ruling DPP's offices. These people are supporters of the TPP, the Taiwan People's Party, which sits in the opposition. They are unhappy with the ruling party.
I think everyone already has developed a feeling of mistrust towards the government.
During the 8 years of Tsai Ing-wen in power, there has been good and bad, which we have seen reflected in the vote in this past election.
Lai needs to regain the trust of these voters. It won't be easy. Unemployment and the rising cost of living have disillusioned the voters. If Lai wants to push any significant reforms, he may face roadblocks in parliament. The DPP lacks a majority and would need support from political rivals. This will be a tough task. Last week, the differences became evident when lawmakers traded blows inside parliament. These differences will also hinder Taiwan's military. Lai wants to increase the defense budget to strengthen Taiwan's defenses against China. However, a split parliament may obstruct this plan. When leaders take high office, they often get a honeymoon period to ease into the job. But Lai may not receive that courtesy because he needs to hit the ground running right away.
Britain has a strange political tradition. Every week, the Prime Minister must meet the monarch, sort of like a weekly audience. The whole thing is purely symbolic. The Prime Minister usually travels to Buckingham Palace, briefs the monarch, probably has some tea, and then leaves. It's a meeting of Britain's two most important people, the powerful Prime Minister and a wealthy but ceremonial monarch. But now there's a twist. King Charles is still rich and ceremonial, but the Prime Minister is richer. That's right. A list of Britain's richest people is out. King Charles is ranked 258th. His net worth is around $770 million. Now look at his Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. He and his wife rank 245th. They're worth $820 million. Talk about life coming a full circle. All those years of plunder, all those decades of colonialism. And for what? An Indian origin Prime Minister to be richer than the British King. Looks like Charles and Sunak have their own little competition because last year the King was ahead on the list. But 2024 has not gone too well. His net worth has increased by around $12 million. But the Sunaks are on a roll. Their net worth rose by $150 million. So they've overtaken the King. Now, Rishi Sunak used to work as a hedge fund manager. He also has big ticket investments, but that's not the source of his family's wealth. That would be his wife's assets. Akshata Murthy, she's the daughter of Narayan Murthy, the co-founder of Infosys. She owns around 0.9% stake in the company, and that's the source of her wealth. Her shares in Infosys are worth around $740 million. Now, for the record, calculating the King's assets is quite hard. Yes, he has his own personal properties, but the Crown owns a lot more. If you add all of that, the King's net worth increases dramatically. To how much? Almost $28 billion. That would make him the third richest person in Britain. But forget all that. Do you know who's the real winner here? The ordinary people of Britain. They have the privilege of being governed by these two men, both multimillionaires, both sitting on wealth they did not earn, and both technically unelected. So the British voter is the real winner. But jokes aside, this is not a good look on Sunak. Charles has no elections to contest. Plus, the people are used to their king being rich. If he isn't rich, then it's a problem, which is not the case for Rishi Sunak. Being rich in politics is not really good optics, especially during a cost of living crisis. Voters see you as distant. They see you as incapable of understanding their pain. And don't get me wrong, this does not mean that British politicians are not doing well. Most of them are pretty well loaded. Boris Johnson, for instance, was worth $2 million. David Cameron was worth $14 million. And Labour leader Keir Starmer is worth more than $9 million. But Rishi Sunak is in a completely different range. His family is worth more than $820 million. The question is, will his wealth hurt his election chances? A new nationwide poll is out. It gives the Labour Party 41% of the votes. Sunak's Conservatives are at 20%. So he's already doing badly. Chances are this news won't help, which is why Downing Street is trying to change the narrative. They say do not judge Sunak based on his wealth. Judge him based on his actions. Well, that's tougher. In the winter of 2022, Rishi Sunak decided to visit a homeless shelter. Here's how that played out.
What do you have? Do you work in a business? Do you want some fruit?
I'm homeless, and I'm actually a homeless person at the minute, but I'm interested in business.
Is that something you'd like to get into?
I wouldn't mind, but I don't know. I'd like to get through Christmas first.
It's painful to watch, almost as painful as seeing King Charles's portrait. The point here is simple. Being rich can be a handicap in politics, but your policies and attitudes also matter, maybe more than your wealth. And that's what Rishi Sunak needs to focus on. Last month, Elon Musk was trending in India. He was supposed to visit the country to discuss future investments, but that visit never happened. Musk cancelled at the last moment, citing Tesla obligations. But those obligations have not kept him from touring other countries in this part of the world. He was in China last month, and now he is in Indonesia to launch Starlink, his internet service. Sri Lanka too is eyeing it. So what exactly is Starlink? Why is it so popular among countries? And should one man control the world's internet? Our next report tells you.
On April 10th, Elon Musk put up a post on X. He said, looking forward to meeting Prime Minister Modi in India. Musk was supposed to visit the country, but days later, Musk cancelled his trip. He said it was because of Tesla obligations. Of course, the cancellation made a lot of headlines here in India, because just a week later, Musk was in China. And now he's in Indonesia. What for? To launch Starlink in the country. Indonesia is a vast archipelago of islands, over 17,000 of them, but there's a wide rural-urban divide. Most of the rural areas have little to no internet connectivity. That's where Starlink comes in. It will help Indonesia widen its internet access.
I hope that Starlink can synergize with internet providers in Indonesia to provide affordable internet access, prioritizing consumer protection, providing a lower price for public service use, including at public health centers, shipping fleet, and remote schools in Indonesia.
Looks like Indonesia's efforts paid off. President Joko Widodo has long been trying to woo Musk. In 2022, he even paid the Tesla CEO a visit in Texas. Indonesia wants Tesla to invest in its EV sector. Musk was asked about this, and while he said he wants to focus on Starlink first, he didn't rule out more investments.
And as I mentioned yesterday in the media discussion, I'm confident that my other companies will invest in Indonesia long term. So thank you.
But Indonesia is not the only country getting a Starlink boost. Sri Lanka too is eyeing it. On Sunday, Musk met with the Sri Lankan president. They discussed the implementation of Starlink in the island nation. Ranil Wickremesinghe even said that he was committed to fast-tracking the application process. So what exactly is Starlink? It's a satellite internet constellation, basically a system of over thousands of satellites. The company is a subsidiary of Elon Musk's SpaceX. SpaceX began launching Starlink satellites in 2019, and right now there are nearly 6,000 of them. So how is Starlink different from normal satellites? Starlink satellites are low orbit. Most satellites are located around 1,000 kilometers from the Earth, but Starlink satellites are much closer. They are located around 550 kilometers from the Earth. That means it can provide faster internet, but the catch is more satellites are needed to ensure proper coverage. And Starlink doesn't come cheap. It's quite costly when compared to normal internet providers. In the United States, it's around $120 a month, and this doesn't include the equipment that starts at around $500. So why then are countries lining up for it? It's because of accessibility. Starlink can provide internet to the most remote areas, whether it's the middle of a desert or on top of a mountain. It can connect remote government facilities too. Plus, it can help you in war. During Russia's invasion of Ukraine, internet services shut down. Elon Musk immediately made Starlink available. About 15,000 Starlink routers were shipped to the country. It kept services running. It helped Ukraine in the battlefield. But many people have raised concerns with this. Starlink is owned by Elon Musk, and if there's anything the billionaire is known for, it's his mercurial mood. On April 30th, SpaceX said it would stop operating in Sudan. That left millions of people in the war-torn nation without internet. The company says it's only allowed to operate in authorized countries. But in the middle of a war, it has cut off thousands from the world. Sounds like a lot of unchecked power for just one man.
Now we turn to South Africa. The country's apex court made a ruling today. It has disqualified Jacob Zuma, South Africa's former president. He cannot stand in next week's election. This is because of a prior prison sentence. In 2021, Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in prison. Anyone who's sentenced to more than 12 months cannot contest in South Africa's election. That is the law. After months of back and forth, the courts have upheld this law. So Zuma is disqualified. It's a blow to his new MK party. And it looks like a boon for the ruling party, that is the ANC, the African National Congress. So how did this happen? And what does this mean for Zuma in the upcoming election? We'll go through these points one by one. First, the how. Jacob Zuma is a former president. He was in charge of South Africa from May 2009 to February 2018. That was when he was in the ANC. But in 2018, Zuma was forced to step down. Corruption was rife in South Africa, and Zuma was associated with a notorious family, the Indian origin Guptas. The Guptas were accused of state capture, of running South Africa like their own feudal fiefdom. And Zuma was said to be closely tied to this family. In fact, he was often mocked and called Zupta back then, to show how close he was to the Guptas. So Zuma was under pressure. He stepped down in 2018. He was probed for corruption for years. Zuma got summons after summons until finally in 2021, he refused to cooperate any further. He chose to defy the courts. And for this non-cooperation, for his contempt of court, Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in prison. But he served less than 3 months. He was released on medical grounds, and the rest of his sentence was eventually pardoned. But the fact remains that Jacob Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in jail, and on that basis, South Africa's top court chose to disqualify him. Let me quote from this verdict. It is declared that Mr. Zuma was convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months' imprisonment and is accordingly not eligible to be a member of and not qualified to stand for election to the National Assembly. So Zuma cannot contest, which means he cannot become president again, because in South Africa, the president is chosen from among members of parliament, like the Prime Minister in India, or the UK, or other countries. But to get the top job, you need to be an MP. Now that Zuma is disqualified, he cannot become president. What does this mean for the upcoming election? Well, not very much. Zuma's win was anyway a long shot. His new MK party was polling at about 8% last month, hardly enough to win the election with or without Zuma as a candidate. Today's disqualification might energize some of his supporters. It may get his party some sympathy votes, but that will not turn an 8% into a 50%. So the MK party's fortunes won't change very much. And Zuma will continue to be the party's face.
The results have been announced on the court, where they said that President Jacob Zuma must not be on the list going to parliament. But Jacob Zuma is still, I'm emphasizing, Jacob Zuma is still a party leader.
But this could affect the ANC, the ruling party of South Africa. They face a challenge this year. The ANC is the party of Nelson Mandela. They brought an end to apartheid in South Africa, an end to institutional racism and segregation. And since then, the ANC has won every election in this country. They've ruled continuously since 1994. But 30 years on, they face voter discontent. Corruption is still rife. Unemployment is high, especially among the youth. Crimes, including murders, are on the rise. Many South Africans are clamoring for change. So the ANC might not win more than 50% of the vote this year. Polls say they will still end up the largest party, with about 40% of the vote, which means the ANC will be vulnerable. If all the opposition parties band together, they could oust the ANC. So Zuma's disqualification could go either way for them. It may galvanize his supporters. It could also demoralize them. South Africa goes to polls next week on the 29th of May. That's when we'll find out the impact of Jacob Zuma's disqualification. Have you heard of cold lava? Sounds like an oxymoron. How can lava be cold? But cold lava is when ash mixes with heavy rains and flows down the slope of a volcano. It destroys everything in its path, including people and homes. Indonesia is no stranger to this, because it has seen way too many volcanic eruptions. Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. It has more than 127 active volcanoes. One of them erupted this weekend. It's called Mount Ibu. It spewed ash 4 kilometers into the sky and forced nearby villages to evacuate. Our next report has more.
When a volcano erupts, a column of hot ash is sent up in the air. This causes friction. It charges particles with electricity. When these charged particles meet the less dense atmosphere above the volcano, it leads to this. That was Mount Ibu, Indonesia's second most active volcano. On Saturday, Mount Ibu erupted, sending ash 4 kilometers into the sky. Purple lightning flashed around its crater. It looked apocalyptic. And for the people living nearby, it was a sign to evacuate. Rescue teams were dispatched. People were put in pickup trucks. They were moved to emergency shelters. No one knows how many people were evacuated. But a huge radius near the volcano was cleared. Indonesia is bracing for more eruptions. Mount Ibu erupted around 21,000 times last year. So it is very active. And Indonesia is not new to destruction from volcanic eruptions. Around 41 people were killed in Sumatra. This after flash floods and cold lava flowed into the homes of people.
At that time I was checking my mobile phone, and there was a text from my sister who said she couldn't come home because it was raining heavily. After that I heard a very loud thunderous sound, then I turned off my mobile phone. Suddenly the lights went out and the water rushed in. I didn't have time to stand up, and I no longer had time to run and was just washed away by the flood.
Cold lava is often like a slurry of wet concrete. It's a mixture of rock and volcanic material. When it rains, it rapidly flows down the slope of the volcano. This lava can flow at hundreds of kilometers per hour. It can go as much as 60 kilometers away from the volcano. Anything that stands in its path is at risk. When Mount Merapi exploded, the same thing happened. Heavy rain swept ash and rocks down the volcano's slope. Homes were destroyed. People died. And 2 whole districts were inundated. Indonesia is no stranger to volcanoes or volcanic eruptions. It sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. That is a string of volcanoes and sites of seismic activity around the edge of the Pacific Ocean. Indonesia itself has 127 active volcanoes. And one or the other is always erupting.
We didn't get the alert as we evacuated to other places far from here, but we saw posts on social media from our friends and relatives about the eruption, with all the fire blazing high, rocks, ash, heavy rain happening at the same time. So we ran even further. This time it was worse.
Which means Indonesia must boost its preparedness for a disaster like this. With every eruption, millions of Indonesians are left with a constant fear. Whether to evacuate or not. With scientific modeling, up-to-date volcano cultures, and more hazard assessment programs, Indonesia can prevent disasters like this.
Our planet is 70% water. You know that already. But did you know that 80% of the ocean remains unexplored? It has never been mapped. It has never been seen by humans. In fact, we know more about Mars than we know about our own ocean floor. So it is ironic that a project for NASA's expedition to Mars made a groundbreaking discovery about our seas. Here's what it found. Living underwater can reverse aging. I know it sounds unbelievable, so let me show you. This is Joseph Dituri. He's a retired naval officer. He lived underwater for 100 days inside a compact pod, a bunker of sorts, in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the deeper you go underwater, the higher the pressure, and Dituri was 30 feet below the surface. So he was living in a highly pressurized environment. He was testing the pod for NASA's next mission to Mars, where spacefaring humans will face a similar environment. But that's not all that he managed to do here. He shattered a world record for time spent underwater. And with that, he managed to reverse the clock. After being submerged for 100 days, Dituri came out 10 years younger. Before the mission, he was 55 years old. That's his chronological age. And his biological age was 44, meaning that's how old his body really is. He has the body of a 44-year-old. But when he got out of the water, his biological age was 34. So he had de-aged by a decade. It may sound like aquatic voodoo, but it's just science. Diamonds are made under pressure. But that's not all. That's not all that pressure can do. It can also reverse the body's age down to the cellular level. Let me tell you how. These are telomeres. These are structures that are found on the ends of our chromosomes, kind of like the plastic tips at the end of shoelaces. As you age, as you grow, cells divide, so telomeres get shorter. Once they're gone, chromosomes lose their protection and cells die. So the idea is, the longer telomeres exist, the longer cells will live and the slower you will age. And that's exactly what happens underwater. When Dituri emerged on dry land, his telomeres were longer, about 20% longer than before the dive. And this has made him fitter. He had 17 times the number of stem cells. His inflammation was down by half. His cholesterol levels also plummeted. His sleep had improved dramatically. In short, his health underwent remarkable transformation and his aging reversed. But before you dive into the ocean, here's a disclaimer. Dituri is a professional diver. He has world-class equipment to survive underwater. He has both skills and resources at his disposal, which does not really apply to everyone. But longevity is not a gate-kept secret. We're living in exciting times. Humans are increasingly discovering how to reverse aging thanks to what they call biohacking. This is a means to enhance the body's functions and by proxy, slow down the aging process through tools, pills, and replacement surgeries. For instance, one man swapped his blood with that of a teenager. This man is 46 years old, but his biological age is 18. It's a bit extreme. But there are other techniques as well, like the use of hyperbaric chambers. These chambers usually contain pure oxygen. They increase the pressure of air, similar to what happens to the body underwater. This can improve brain health and boost healing, which slows down aging. But if all of this sounds too complicated or expensive, science has a simple suggestion for you. Reduce the damage to your body, which applies to your eating habits, environmental factors, and lifestyle patterns. According to a study, your lifestyle choices can influence your genes. They can offset the impact of genes by 62% and add 5 years to your life. If you have a healthy lifestyle, you will have healthy cells, meaning a younger body. So before you build the next Atlantis city, know that you don't have to turn your back on basics to turn back the clock. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Portugal, a comet fragment lights up the night skies before burning up over the Atlantic. In South Korea, sleeping competition aims to help citizens snooze more often. And in Spain, dogs take on the waves with their human companions in a surfing contest. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1498, Portuguese sailor Vasco da Gama landed in India's southern coast. He discovered a direct sea route from Europe to India. While his goal was to buy Indian spices, his voyage triggered a chain of events, one that led to centuries of colonialism in India. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. South Africa goes to the polls on the 29th of May. I will track the election and bring you ground reports. Is it the end of the road for the African National Congress? And will former President Jacob Zuma stage a dramatic comeback? From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.